So, my part of this. Speed round questions. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'll just ask you to be concise.
I'll try.
All right. Have you ever personally window shopped churches? Is it completely wrong? Because we were talking about this window shopping, going to churches and having a checklist. This, that. Is window shopping churches completely wrong? And then the other part of the question is, have you ever done it?
No.
You've never done it?
I've never done it.
Okay.
I always wanted authentic community. It didn't matter what was going on or whatever, as long as the God. Well, early on, I didn't have the knowledge and the experience I have now.
Right.
So as I was growing in my faith, the values changed, but I always wanted real.
Right.
Always wanted real. I wanted real community,
Gotcha.
And that, that came with some community that, wasn't biblical at times, but I saw real people even within some communities some churches that struggled with some of the foundational things. So, I never was a artificial type. I always wanted genuine and authentic.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What do you think of churches dedicating ministries to helping with life skills?
I think that's good as long as it's Christ-centered.
There's ways to do life skills with the way of centering it on Christ, right?
Yeah. I think if it comes from a biblical conviction, then do it.
And by the life skills, I'm talking about teaching people how to get their finances right, teaching them.
Oh, you can teach
about,
that from the scriptures.
Yeah. Well, I meant today, all right, showing them how to get into the investments,
how to do their taxes.
All this stuff right here. Owning a home.
Right.
On maybe you have kids that are from the hood that don't know how to cut wood, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like learning how to fish and all these life skills, learning how to cook. And churches, there's certain ministries in churches that are dedicated to helping people with life skills, man.
Right. Yeah. I think it's okay as long as you do the going beneath the practice and going into the intent.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
Which the Bible deals with.
Good motives.
Yeah.
What are some absolutes we need to look for in a church? And then I'll follow that with, are there any deal breakers?
Yeah. Well, they have to be preaching the word, Christ has to be exalted. And the worship has to be Christ-centered. That's super important. Is there discipleship? Is there concern for doctrine, sound doctrine? Those are the things you should look for. What do they believe?
Right.
Not what are they doing? What do they believe?
How about,
and is it driving what they're doing?
Okay, gotcha. I was going to say, how about a church that says they believe all these things, but they're not really displaying it?
Right. See, that's the thing.
Is that a deal breaker?
That happens a lot with a lot of sound churches on paper. Yeah. They just in practice, it's like it's artificial. It's whack. You can feel it. It's like, so you can have an assent to doctrine, but don't have a heart for people. You know what I'm saying? That happens. I've seen it.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is the church responsible for feeding the poor, housing the homeless, supplying the needs of those outside of the physical church? Is the church responsible for that?
I think the church, I wouldn't say responsible. I say that the outworking of a local congregation is to do those things, so long as God is being prioritized, His glory is prioritized, and His people, the love within God's people should produce that work. You know what I'm saying?
I hate to put you on the spot, but are there any scriptures that you can say that back that up?
The scriptures we already mentioned, how will they know about Him? Well, it's by the way we love one another.
One another.
Right.
Right.
The one another is the producer of good works to the world. You know what I'm saying? So I would say that's foundational to Christian service in the world.
Okay.
There's a love for God and a love. That's why Jesus said it, the 2 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love one another. You know what I'm saying? And that then produces good works. You know? You can't do good works if you don't have a love for God. You can't do good works if you don't have a love for one another.
It produces a heart that wants to do good works.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
And so then it just comes naturally.
Right.
It just comes naturally. Do you think we can become too structured in the church setting? And if so, can it lead to having no presence of the Holy Spirit?
Say that again.
Do you think that we can become too structured in a church setting?
Yes.
And if so, do you think that it leads to having no presence of the Holy Spirit?
I think you could be too structured where, you know, you get in the way of natural outworking of conviction.
Right.
You know,
like man's hand is in the pot too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And or we have things set up. The Trellis and the Vine. That book is a good book.
I've read it, but I heard it's good.
Yeah, you can't confuse the trellis with the vine, and the vine with the trellis. You know what naturally grows versus what's been structured. You know, so the trellis or the vine actually grows in the trellis. You know, but it's not the trellis, and the trellis is not the vine.
Okay.
And as leaders, we got to be careful because the vine is God's people. You know what I'm saying? Or the branch. We should say branches, right?
Yeah,
the vine is Christ.
Yeah.
But what grows naturally is God's people, and all these structures that are set up, that's not life. Okay. That's not alive, right? So knowing that difference is important, especially when you're dealing with people.
Last question. What advice would you give to someone searching for the right church? Especially if there's none that are good locally. So what's some good advice that you would give to someone who's searching for a good church?
I'm going to use the Ferrano family who drive 45 minutes every Sunday. They take the ride to find a church, to go to a church that, you know, that loves Jesus and has the central components in it, you know, the biblical preaching, biblical community, you know. If you got to drive an hour to do it, do it.
So being in a good, sound church is more important than just wanting to be in a church that's local.
Yeah, because if the local churches around you are compromised, then I would say don't even do it, you know. Now, it's tricky because I've been a part of, as a genuine believer, I've been a part of churches that weren't healthy.
Okay.
So I think God in his sovereignty allows that to take place, and still does.
Right.
So that's tricky. I think in God's sovereign work, he allows it. But if I'm not God, so I would recommend someone a solid church to go, you know, even though God sovereignly works that out somehow in his sovereignty, you know.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I would push people to be a part of a local church that is Christ exalting and loves Jesus.
Right.
You know.